Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today wasn't really a planned video, especially on this topic, but it's sort of just come up, and I don't know if it's coming up organically for me or it's coming up for a reason, but I wanted to share it with you. So hit the like button and buckle up because we're going to be looking at timelines and what's going on. So um, I don't want to say too much because again, I'm trying to learn as I'm going with you guys watching this video. But let me start the video and we'll see together what happens.
Majestic is ruled by a secret society, is what you're saying.
Well, Majestic has been the most famous, next to probably the Freemasons, secret society of itself. And there are many of the Freemasons who inhabit the Majestic. These associated secret societies, like the Scottish Rite and the York Rite, are then imparted into the secret society known as the Majestic.
Majestic, or Majestic 12, is supposed to have been a secret group inside the US government, created after World War II to deal with things that didn't fit into normal military or scientific channels. He says their job, at least on paper, was to handle information that was considered too sensitive, too strange, or too destabilizing to be public. Now, if you search for Majestic online, most of what you'll find says that it's fake, that it's not real and there's nothing credible behind it. But let's be honest for a moment. If something like this really existed, do you think you'd be able to find clear answers on a simple Google search? Groups like that wouldn't leave a clean trail behind them. They wouldn't be documented in public, and people who speak about them wouldn't be treated kindly. They'd be questioned, discredited, or attacked. That's just how things like this tend to work. Dan says Majestic was funded through government structures, but it did not function like a normal government agency. It did not report in the usual way. It did not fall under clear political authority. One critical point he says he was present at was the T9 conference. This was a closed meeting in New Mexico where formal negotiations took place between multiple groups from different timelines. The groups present were described as future human groups, not one single group, but several, with different origins and different development paths. One of these groups was referred to as the P45, described as being 45,000 years ahead of us.
What is the T9 conference?
During the course of speaking with extraterrestrials and our interactions with them from the 1950s onward, there have been a series of treaties established between we and they meaning a future human intelligence, time travelers.
Alien kind by
Well,
by
they're
inference?
humans. They're
Okay,
human
you
lineage.
consider them humans.
They're humans.
Okay.
They're human beings, albeit different from what we would expect to see as a human being. But then again, if we look in the history, the presently accepted history of the evolution of humankind, if one were to walk into a conference held by Neanderthals, one would be taken aback. Well, in the same way, one may be taken aback by walking into a conference with these gentlemen.
The purpose of the T9 conference was to establish and adjust agreements between present-day institutions and several future human groups that, according to him, were able to interact with our timeline. These groups were presented as future branches of humanity, different outcomes of the same species, shaped by very different conditions over very long periods of time. Dan describes three main groups. One of them is the P45. This group is described as coming from a timeline roughly 45,000 years ahead of ours. They are presented as technologically advanced, but still relatively biologically stable. Another is referred to as the P52. They were about 52,000 years ahead of us, shaped by harsher, long-term conditions, including environmental and biological degradation. Within the P52 line, Dan describes two subgroups. One of them is often referred to as the J-rods. They're described as biologically fragile, physically weak, and highly dependent on technology to survive. Their genetic structure has degraded over time, making them increasingly reliant on artificial systems. The other P52 subgroup is referred to as the Orions, sometimes also called the Nordics or the Talls. They are described as taller, more physically robust, and more biologically stable than the J-rods, having developed along a different survival path. So these future groups were facing long-term biological collapse in their own timelines and seeking ways to stabilize or reverse that process. That is where something called the Lotus principle comes in. Lotus is described as a biological or energetic process connected to development, neurological function, and long-term genetic stability. It is presented as something rare, difficult to access, and extremely important for the future groups. Dan describes Lotus as a biological system, something that interacts with life at a very fundamental level, and this is where his own role as the biologist becomes relevant. At Majestic, they were researching Project Lotus as a biological and environmental process. It started from measurements taken in areas rich in silicon-based minerals, where unusual electromagnetic patterns could be detected. These patterns were not random noise, they showed structure, repetition, and internal coherence. More importantly, they interacted with living cells. In controlled laboratory conditions, exposure to these signals caused measurable biological effects. Cells changed their behavior. In some cases, damaged or inactive cells resumed activity in altered forms. This suggests that Lotus was not a device or a piece of technology, but a natural process embedded in the environment, capable of influencing biological systems at a fundamental level. Over time, this raised a more serious question. If such a process could affect cell function, then it could also affect long-term genetic stability, development, and degeneration across generations. That is why Lotus became important. The future groups wanted access to Lotus because it could help stabilize their genetic decline. In exchange, they offered information about future events, about long-term outcomes, about what happens if certain paths are followed. That is what makes this story uncomfortable.
We were not supposed to communicate privately with them or anything like that, that we had a certain job to do and we were to get it done. And that was the scientific job of removing the samples and then the studying of the samples for the back engineering, these are the reversing like chemicals.
The idea was to reverse an illness that he and his people have, which is the 52.
The 52s, and what we were trying to do initially, jumping off onto the biology a little bit, what we were trying to do is we were trying to actually strip the exterior cytoplasm off from the cells and produce cells which would be independently functioning, then to understand those cells biochemically, genetically, so that those cells could then be re-added as a graft into the J-rod to attempt to ameliorate the neuropathy.
The idea of multiple timelines doesn't start with Dan. It already exists in physics. In the 1950s, Hugh Everett proposed what's known as the many worlds interpretation, the idea that reality doesn't collapse into one single outcome, but branches into multiple possible outcomes. Later, physicists like David Deutsch expanded on this idea and treated parallel timelines as a serious theoretical model. In this view, reality isn't a single line moving forward, it's a branching structure of coexisting possibilities. This idea also appears outside physics. Over the years, different people connected to classified programs, intelligence agencies, or advanced research have spoken about timelines, parallel versions of events, and branching outcomes. Some call them timelines, others call them parallel worlds, others describe them as alternative versions of the same reality.
Basically, you're saying there's two timelines. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of the work of physicists now that are saying, look, if you can have two timelines, you can have 2 million.
Well, don't we really have 3 or 4? I'm discussing 24,000s, I'm discussing 45,000s, 52,000s, and present day. How many timelines are that? Because these people moved ahead linearly in their timeline. Just because we want to call it timeline 2 doesn't mean that there are other effects or superimposings which are occurring on different realities during even their own timelines.
Exactly. I mean, there's a sense at which what you're talking about is not so much that the P45s, for example, timeline won't exist, as it will actually separate from our reality and become more like a parallel reality instead of an intersecting one.
From what I understand, the people who were just prior, which would be us, according to their history, to the people who were just after, exist as a straight vector of time.
Later, physicists like Bryce DeWitt, Sean Carroll, and Max Tegmark developed and discussed this idea further with modern physics. They approached it from different angles: quantum mechanics, cosmology, and the mathematical structure of reality. But the underlying idea remained similar. The reality may not be a single linear path. And they're not alone. Over the years, many other researchers, Philosophers and theorists have explored similar models, using different language, different frameworks, and different assumptions. The idea also connects to how time itself is described in physics. Albert Einstein's theory of relativity treats time as part of a four-dimensional structure called space-time, where past, present, and future exist within the same geometric framework. And this is what makes people uncomfortable, because there's one show that keeps getting the future right: The Simpsons. So right, and so early, that many have started asking if they don't just predict it, but access it. Here are concrete examples. Donald Trump as US President showed up in the show in 2000. He entered office in 2016. Wrist video calls appeared in 1995. Apple Watch video calls became normal by 2015. Face-to-face mobile video appeared in 1995. FaceTime launched in 2010. Autocorrect jokes appeared in 1994. Smartphones adopted it widely after 2007. Touchscreen phones appeared in 1995. The iPhone arrived in 2007. Self-driving cars were shown in 2010. Real road tests became public by 2020. Delivery robots appeared in 2014. Cities began using them in 2021. Virtual reality appeared in 1997. Consumer VR took off around 2016. Digital money jokes appeared in 1997. Bitcoin went live in 2009. Disney buying Fox appeared in 1998. The deal closed in 2019. A tiger attacking Siegfried and Roy appeared in 1993. The real incident occurred in 2003. Mass surveillance themes appeared in 1998. Snowden's leaks exposed it in 2013. Greek financial collapse jokes aired in 2012. Greece defaulted in 2015. Lab-grown meat appeared in 1999. It entered restaurants by 2020. Civilian drones appeared in 2005. They became common after 2013. Mars colonization jokes aired in 1994. SpaceX began serious plans around 2020. Lady Gaga's performance aired in 2012. She did it at the Super Bowl in 2017. The Higgs boson appeared in 1998. CERN confirmed it in 2012. Voting machine disputes aired in 2008. They dominated headlines in 2020. Facial recognition jokes aired in 2003. It spread in public spaces by 2018. AI-generated art appeared in 2004. It went mainstream in 2022. Voice assistants appeared in 1998. Alexa launched in 2014. Smart glasses appeared in 2002. Google Glass appeared in 2013. Now, getting back at Dan Burish's story. He mentioned something called Project Looking Glass. It's described as a system designed to observe possible future outcomes, not by predicting one fixed future, but by modeling a range of potential timelines based on current conditions and decisions. The idea is that reality does not move toward a single result, but into a branching set of possibilities, and this system was built to explore that structure. Looking Glass is described as combining advanced computation with physical modeling to simulate how events might unfold over time. Different variables produce different outcomes, allowing multiple possible futures to be compared side by side. Over time, this creates something like a map of trajectories, showing which paths stabilize, which diverge, and which tend to collapse.
You've got the Looking Glass technology that they use, and you use, and you were instrumental in discovering. Were you in?
No. This is an original technology which was derived from ancient cylinder seals by people from our future who provided it to us, meaning the rogues, the P-45s.
Okay, the people from our negative future.
That's right. We wouldn't have this lovely technology if it wasn't planted in our past for us to use now.
Dan mentions that Looking Glass was originally based on a set of very old instructions for accessing naturally occurring wormholes in what he calls hyperspace. Those instructions weren't treated as mythology, but as technical guidance. The equipment was built by following those instructions first, and only later was it modified and refined through experimentation. Over time, this led to the discovery that the system could be used as a kind of peering glass, a way to observe different aspects of both the future and the past. He links those original instructions to ancient cylinder seals, which he says slightly predate the Sumerian period and were later recopied into Sumerian seals as well.
I would say that they slightly predate Sumerian time frame, but that some of the information which came down from cylinder seals that slightly predated the Sumerian time frame were then recopied in Sumerian seals as well. And
Egyptian?
those cylinder seals, oh yes, and those cylinder seals, to the best of my knowledge, have all been obtained.
From Iraq.
Some of them from Iraq, yes.
Some of them from
Some of
Egypt?
them from Egypt, some of them from other countries where they were being stored.
This interview was recorded in 2006 with a strong focus on what was expected around 2012. The concern was an approaching energetic event, a large-scale interaction between Earth and the Sun, and what was described as a galactic energy flow passing through the planet. This event alone was expected to put stress on Earth's systems, but the real concern was what would happen if that energy interacted with active technology, especially technology designed to observe, model, or interact with space-time. In the interview, a probability is mentioned, a 19% chance with 85% confidence that a geophysical disaster could occur. That still meant an 81% chance that it would not. But the risk wasn't treated lightly, because the scale of the potential outcome was extreme. The disaster described was a global geophysical shift affecting the Earth's crust and causing massive loss of life. The concern was that the active systems could trigger or amplify that process, that they could turn a possibility into a certainty. That's why the decision was to disable the technology completely, separate its components, and remove it from use. The goal was to let that period pass without technological interference affecting space-time. Well, such topics make me question reality. These whistleblowers, the Mandela effect, the Simpsons, and the fact that more and more scientists are talking about multiple timelines and non-linear time. I know, it's hard to even imagine something like that. Again, I'm not here to tell you what to believe. I'm just here to show you the information. It's your responsibility to look deeper, do your own research, and decide what makes sense to you. Thank you for staying.
Yeah, there you go, guys. So we could sort of learned something together this evening. And yeah, it's crazy with the Simpsons thing. Like, I remember that sort of shot where Trump's coming down the escalator with his wife, and they had it in the Simpsons, and then it was the exact shot that actually happened when Trump was coming down the escalator, many years ago. And the Simpsons, Matt Groening especially, has some sort of understanding with some higher up power to know what's happening and what's going on, and that's sort of what is sort of appeared to me by looking at the predictions of the Simpsons, and especially with COVID-19 as well. Like, they predicted a virus that was carried in a box. When Homer opened it up, he got sick, and I'm not saying that's how COVID was started, but they sort of had a sort of an understanding. I think it was 10 years before COVID actually happened, when that episode aired, that something was going to happen. With the timelines, I definitely do believe that this whole CERN thing, I'm still learning. I've only heard about it just this evening. Um, but the timelines that we live in, I do believe, are shaped and shifted depending on what the people in power want to take us down. And I'm not just talking about aliens, I'm talking about how they can shape our reality and how they can manipulate us to um, be tricked with certain things, like AI, like what this man was talking about, these computer modules that can take us to 25,000 years down the road, 48,000 years, 52,000 years into the future, and that's pretty crazy. But we are on different timelines, and David Icke would even be saying, I remember in an interview that he was talking about how we can shift timelines dependent on certain factors, which again, to my mind, is still complex. We were told when we go through school, and when we grow up, that there's the future, then there's the past, but then right now is the present. But what happens if there is none of that? It's just where we shift our perception to, because our minds can take us back into our memory. But if memory gets diluted, like the Mandela effect, what even is the truth of that? Is it what we think happened to us back then, or what we and the whole visualization, what you put out is what you get. I'm a big believer in that. I'm a big believer in that. But in life, action rewards. So life rewards action. That's how our timeline, so to speak, is structured. Um, and through our choices, ultimately, is what happens with our future going forward. So yeah, this is an interesting one, guys. What do you reckon? Comment down below, like, subscribe. Do you know about CERN? Do you know about timelines? What do you know? Share it with me. Would love to hear it. Until next time, guys. I'll see you next time.